Welcome to the Ctrl Alt Society podcast.
Hey, it's really good to be here for this one.
Today we are diving into the plumbing of the internet. And I don't mean the fiber optic cables or the servers. I mean the actual currency that makes the whole thing spin. We're looking at an invisible war happening right behind your screen right now in 2026.
Yeah, it's a war between two completely different ways of defining reality. On one side, you have the legacy volume metrics, so the old gods like clicks, hits, impressions. And on the other side, you have this insurgent force, which we call modern attention measurement.
Right, and to set the stage for you listening, we really have to acknowledge exactly where we are today. It's 2026, and the internet it just feels incredibly crowded.
Crowded is definitely a polite way to put it. We're drowning. I mean, the sources we're unpacking for this deep dive describe a absolute flood of what they call AI slop.
AI slop. Really love that term. It sounds gross, but it's just so accurate.
It is, yeah. It's this endless tide of mass-produced, low-quality content that's generated specifically to game search engines. It's not written for you, it's not written for humans, it's written for algorithms. But here is the central tension of this whole deep dive. While we're drowning in more content than ever before, the way the smart money actually measures the value of that content is undergoing this massive revolution.
Right, because the old currency, the click, is basically crashing. It's inflation on steroids.
Ah.
So our mission today is to unpack why the click is dying as a currency, why advertisers are finally revolting against a system that is just rife with fraud, and how selling time, literally seconds and hours, might be the only thing that actually saves high-quality journalism.
Exactly. It's a fundamental shift from asking how many people saw this to asking how long did it actually matter to them. And that distinction changes everything about how we build the web.
Okay, so let's unpack this. How did we end up with the click as the ultimate ruler of the internet in the first place? Because it feels like it's been this way since the dawn of time.
It does feel that way, but it's actually a relic of a very specific era. If you look at the history in our sources, early web analytics were built for e-commerce. They were designed for buying shoes.
Okay, buying shoes, that's simple enough.
Right, it's a funnel. You search for running shoes, you click a link, you look at the shoe, you buy the shoe. In that specific context, a click is a perfect proxy for intent. It literally means I am interested in this physical object.
Which makes perfect sense if you're Amazon or Nike.
Exactly. But then we took that exact same ruler, that same set of e-commerce metrics, and we applied it to news, to journalism, to art. We started measuring the value of a war correspondence report from the front lines with the exact same tools we use to measure sneaker sales, hits, and page views.
Which seems innocent enough at first until you realize that reading a deep article about a complex geopolitical crisis is a completely different human behavior than shopping for loafers.
Precisely. The intent is different, the engagement is different, but the metric just remained the same. And now, in 2026, that system is completely breaking down because of what our sources call the zero-click reality.
Right, this was a major point in the predictions we reviewed, the zero-click future. Walk us through what that actually looks like for the user.
So think about how you use the web today. You have a question. Say, who won the World Cup in 1998? Or what's the capital of Mongolia? You type that into Google, or you just ask your AI assistant.
And the AI just tells me, France, Lomatar, boom, I'm done. I don't click anything.
Exactly. You got the value, you got the answer. But the publisher, the website that actually paid a human to do the reporting or host that data, they got zero traffic.
Wow, so that's the zero click.
Right. You might have technically generated an impression on the search results page, like technically you saw their brand name in the little citation, but you never visited their site. So if I'm a publisher, I might have 50,000 people seeing my headline in an AI summary today, but zero people actually on my website, which means zero ad revenue and zero subscriptions.
That is just terrifying if you're running a media company. You could be famous in the search results and literally bankrupt in reality.
Which is why the source material strongly suggests that volume, those raw impression numbers, no longer equals value or visits. You can have millions of impressions and absolutely no business model.
And this disconnect forces us to look at human behavior differently, too. The source has brought up this really fascinating concept from cognitive science called the try-by model. I found this super helpful for just understanding my own brain, frankly.
Yeah, it's a fantastic framework. It basically splits our attention on social media into two distinct neurological stages.
Okay, break it down for us. What's stage one?
Stage one is try, or dwell. This is governed by System 1 thinking. If you follow behavioral economics at all, You know, System 1 is fast, it's impulsive, automatic, and highly emotional.
This is the lizard brain taking over.
Exactly. It's the rubbernecking effect. You're scrolling through your feed at 100 miles an hour, and you stop because you see something loud or bright or shocking. A car crash, a fight, a scream.
So when I'm doom scrolling at midnight and I stop on a video of a guy just screaming in a cloud, that's me dwelling.
That is you dwelling. You are trying the content. But here is the massive kicker. For years, the algorithms thought that was the goal. They completely confused dwelling with liking.
Because I stopped scrolling, the algorithm goes, aha, they stopped. They must love screaming men, let's give them more screaming men.
Precisely. But the research shows that dwelling is often just shock. It's confusion or horror. It is not satisfaction. Satisfaction actually comes in stage 2, which is the buy or engage phase.
And this is the system 2 thinking part.
Right. Rational, deliberative, slower. This is the part of your brain where you actually decide, hey, this is credible, this is smart, I trust this. That is when you actually like, share, subscribe, or send it to a friend.
So we've had this massive disconnect. The algorithms have been optimizing for the car crash, the dwell, because it's just so easy to measure. Time spent on screen. But the real value comes from the engagement, which is much harder to get.
And that feedback loop of optimizing for the dwell is exactly what created the toxic, polarized content environment we've been living in. We basically built a machine that financially rewards being a car crash.
That is a deeply depressing realization. It was honestly my biggest aha moment from reading this material. Just because you stopped scrolling doesn't mean you liked what you saw. You might have been horrified, but the old metrics just saw time spent equals good.
And that is why the shift to distinguishing between try and buy is so critical. We are finally realizing that high-quality attention looks very different than low-quality shock value.
Which brings us to the people actually paying for all of this, the advertisers. Because if the metrics are this broken, they must be losing their minds right now.
Losing your minds is putting it lightly. It is an absolute advertiser's nightmare. For a long time, advertisers have been paying for impressions. They pay a micro fee every single time an ad loads on a page. But the data we have in the sources is just shocking.
Let's hit the listeners with that bot statistic, because that one completely blew my mind.
Yeah, in certain contexts, analyses show that bot traffic, so entirely non-human traffic, has accounted for up to 56% of web traffic.
56%. So theoretically, more than half the quote-unquote people on the internet might be literal robots.
In some sectors, yes, absolutely. These are just automated scripts running on servers, pinging websites to generate fake page views, just to trick the ad exchanges into paying out money. It's a ghost economy. Billions of dollars changing hands for ads that no human eyes ever even looked at.
Yeah, and even when a human is present, it doesn't actually mean they saw the ad. Which brings us to the viewability crisis.
Right. There was a report from ComScore mentioned in our sources noting that 54% of display ads weren't even viewable by a consumer.
Wait, can you define viewable? Because if I pay for an ad, my basic assumption is that a human can physically see it.
You would think that. But the bar is incredibly low. The Media Rating Council, the MRC, set the industry standard for what counts as a viewable impression. Do you want to guess what it is?
I read the source material, and I still don't believe it.
It is just 50% of the ad's pixels being in view for 1 continuous second.
1 second, and only half the ad.
Correct. So if you're scrolling rapidly past an article and the bottom half of a banner ad flickers onto your screen for a single second before you scroll past it, that counts. The advertiser paid for that impression delivered.
That is wild. That's not an impression. That's basically a subliminal flash.
Exactly. And programmatic advertising just poured gasoline on this entire fire.
Break that down for us a bit. Programmatic is just the automated buying of ads, right?
Yes. Instead of a human calling a publisher and saying, I want to buy an ad on your site, it's algorithms buying ad space in milliseconds across millions of different websites. It spreads ads across the entire internet really efficiently, but because the system optimizes for the lowest price and the highest volume, it naturally chases the garbage.
It chases the AI slop.
It does. It places ads on fraudulent sites or these massively low-quality content farms purely because they're cheap. The sources call this CPM wastage, which is basically money just flushed down the toilet, and it can be up to 40% of an entire campaign budget.
And this leads to what one of our sources called algorithmic absurdities. This part
Yeah.
made me laugh, but it's actually pretty gross when you think about it.
It-
Tell us about the earwax example.
Ah, yes, the earwax. You have probably seen these. You're on a perfectly respectable news site, you read a great article, you scroll to the bottom, and suddenly there are these grid ads featuring just grotesque images of toenail fungus or earwax removal.
Unfortunately, yes, I have. And I always wonder, why do I see those? I don't have an earwax hobby. I don't search for fungus online.
It's because the algorithm isn't optimizing for your genuine interest. It's optimizing for the click-through rate, or CTR. And the average click rate on standard, boring ads is tiny, like fractions of a percent.
So they basically need something that jolts you into stopping the scroll.
Exactly. A gross image creates a visceral reaction. It appeals straight to that System 1 lizard brain. You pause. Maybe you click out of morbid curiosity, or maybe you click by accident because you're frantically trying to close it.
And to the algorithm, a click is a click. It doesn't care why.
Right. The algorithm sees that click and thinks, success. People love earwax. Let's show them more earwax.
So we've built a system where bots are watching ads, humans are scrolling past ads they can't even see. And the few ads we actually do see are pictures of foot fungus because an algorithm is deeply confused about human psychology.
That is the current state of legacy volume metrics. It is a fundamentally broken economy. It's a race to the bottom.
So what does this all mean for the future? We obviously need a solution. And the sources point to a really interesting pivot here, time as currency.
This is the revolution happening right now. What if, instead of selling views, which we know are easy to fake and easy to ignore, we started selling actual time?
And this isn't just a theory anymore, right? There are big players actually doing this in 2026.
Yes. The Financial Times and The Economist were huge pioneers here. They looked at the digital landscape and realized they had a massive problem. They could not compete with the tech giants or the clickbait farms on raw volume. They simply couldn't produce enough content.
Where the Financial Times cannot churn out 5,000 articles of AI slop a day.
Exactly. So they realized that selling CPM, cost per thousand impressions, was a losing game for them. So they shifted to CPH, which stands for cost per hour.
Cost per hour. So an advertiser pays for the actual amount of time I spend physically looking at their content.
Exactly. And the technology to measure this is much more sophisticated than just asking, did the page load? They use advanced tools like Chartbeat or Moat to measure active engagement.
How does that work technically? Is it just a stopwatch on the page?
It's way more than that. They track mouse movements, they track scrolling speed, and crucially, they ensure the tab is actually active. If you open an article in a new tab and then go back to checking your email in another window, the clock stops.
Oh, interesting. So I can't just leave it open in the background to rack up time and look like I'm reading.
No, it only counts when you are genuinely there. That is much, much harder for a bot to fake than a simple page load.
But does it actually work? Do advertisers get anything out of it? Or is it just a vanity metric so the publisher can charge more?
The results were genuinely stunning. The Financial Times found that ads which were viewable for 5 or more seconds saw a 79% increase in brand lift and a 55% increase in familiarity.
That is huge. A 79% lift just from a few seconds.
It turns out when a human actually looks at something for more than a fraction of a blink, they remember it. Who knew? Memory requires duration. You simply cannot implant a brand message in a microsecond.
It seems so obvious when you say it out loud, but it completely flips the incentive structure of the web. And looking at the 2026 landscape from our sources, there's this new metric evolving from this called interaction quality, or IQ.
Right, IQ is the natural evolution of CPH. It tries to measure meaningfulness. So now, marketing tools are assigning an actual IQ score to user actions.
Give us an example of that. What's considered low IQ versus high IQ?
A 3-second view of a TikTok video as you're swiping past, that is low IQ. It's passive, it's fleeting, it's System 1.
Ouch. My entire evening routine is basically low IQ.
In this specific metric sense, yes it is. But reading a full blog post or sending a direct message to ask a brand a question, that is high IQ. Modern sites are now tracking things like hover trails, which is literally where your mouse lingers as you read, and session stickiness to see if you are actually deeply engaged.
Session stickiness. I really like that term. It implies you're sticking around because you genuinely want to, not because you're trapped by an algorithm.
Exactly. They want to distinguish genuine interest from things like rage clicking.
Rage clicking. We have definitely all done that. Clicking into the comments just to see the fight.
That's engagement, technically speaking, but it's negative. High IQ looks for positive, deliberate engagement.
So we are moving from how many to how deep. And this brings us to the really big question of this deep dive: can CPH, this cost per hour model, actually save journalism?
Yep.
Because we know the news industry has been in free fall for a while.
This is where the business model shift becomes so crucial. Think about the incentives. If a publisher is paid for clicks, what are they financially incentivized to write?
Clickbait. Endless slideshows. You won't believe what happened next. They just want me to click, get mad, click again, and leave.
Exactly. That's a volume play. It creates a frantic, shallow internet. But if a publisher is paid for time spent cost per hour, they are heavily incentivized to write deep, high-quality articles that actually keep you reading.
They actively want you to get lost in the story.
Right. They need you to stay for 5–10 minutes. And you cannot trick someone into staying for 10 minutes with a misleading headline. The content actually has to be good once they get there.
So the financial incentive finally aligns with good journalism.
That is the hope, yes. The sources describe what they call a barbell effect that's likely to solidify by 2026. The media landscape is essentially splitting in two.
A barbell, so big and heavy on the ends and thin in the middle.
Right. On one side, you have the AI slop and the mass-produced content. This is a commodity, it's cheap, it's everywhere, and it's mostly garbage. It will continue to run on the old, cheap metrics.
And on the other side of the barbell?
Distinctive, human-driven, deep-dive journalism. This is the premium side. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, high-end specialist newsletters. The expert consensus is that CPH selling time benefits this premium side immensely.
Because nobody is going to spend 5 minutes carefully reading an AI-generated article about the top 10 toaster ovens.
Exactly. You can't fake time spent with bad content, so CPH does not help clickbait farms at all. It specifically helps the legacy publishers and creators who have loyal, engaged audiences.
This sounds like the silver bullet we've been waiting for. So why hasn't everyone switched yet? Why am I still seeing earwax ads?
Industry inertia. It is the absolute hardest thing to change. The entire digital ad marketplace, which is billions and billions of dollars, is built on the infrastructure of the impression. The actual literal pipes of the internet are built for clicks.
It's hard to rewire the whole house while you're still living in it.
Ad agencies are just deeply entrenched in this old model. It is very easy to buy cheap impressions in bulk. It is much harder to explain to a client why they should pay more for hours of attention, even if the data proves it works better.
It's the old nobody gets fired for buying IBM thing, but applied to ad impressions.
Precisely. To pivot a financial ship of that size takes a very long time. But the fraud and the waste, that 56% bot traffic we talked about, are becoming so incredibly expensive that they might not have a choice anymore.
So let's zoom out to wrap this up. We are moving from an era of how many saw it to how long did it matter. And that just feels like a fundamental shift in how we exist online.
It is. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, that dual systems theory we talked about earlier, it's actually a shift towards our better selves.
How so?
Well, the old model explicitly optimized for System 1, our impulses, our fears, our lizard brain. That is literally what doom scrolling is. But optimizing for time and quality appeals to System 2, our rational, thoughtful, deliberate brain.
So we start building tools that hack our anxiety and start building tools that earn our attention.
Right. If the internet economy starts valuing our focus instead of our frenzy, we might actually build a much healthier digital society.
That is a genuinely hopeful thought.
However,
There is always a however. You couldn't just let us off the hook that easy.
there is an important question we need to ask, a final provocative thought to leave you with as you mull this over. If we successfully switch to an attention economy, will we actually get better content?
What's the dark alternative?
Well, will the algorithms just get even scarier at hacking our psychology to keep us staring at the screen longer, regardless of whether we're actually enjoying it or benefiting from it?
Oh, wow. So instead of clickbait, we get like trance bait, content designed to just hypnotize us into staring for hours.
It is a real possibility. If time is the new money, the machines will inevitably learn how to steal our time just as efficiently as they learn to steal our clicks. They might just optimize for deep addiction rather than deep quality.
That's slightly less hopeful, but definitely something to watch out for. We solve one problem and potentially create a much stranger one.
It keeps us on our toes. The invisible war for your attention never really ends. It just changes weapons.
It certainly does. Well, on that note, we want to thank you for lending your high-quality attention to this deep dive. We know time is the new currency, and we really appreciate you spending yours with us.
Indeed. Thank you.
See you in the next deep dive.